The letter came in a creamy gold envelope, sealed with an embossed K. It was an invitation, no, a warning masked in cursive. The Kensington family's annual reunion was being hosted in Savannah, Georgia, at the luxurious Bellstone estate. I stared at the envelope for a long while, not because I was flattered, but because I knew exactly what was coming next. My name is Alara Kensington, though in my world now I go by Alara Va. 15 years ago I was the disappointment, the dropout, the artist who turned down a job at the family law firm to study design and hospitality. I was the girl who chose grit over generational wealth, and for that they never let me forget it. My phone buzzed. It was my cousin Blythe, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "Alara, just checking in. You got the invite, right?" I kept my tone flat. "I did," she giggled. "This year is a little exclusive. It's going to be very tailored. Only family members who are contributing to the name. You understand." I looked out the window of my Miami office. The sun poured across the skyline, bouncing off the glass panels of Vail Global, a luxury design and development firm I built from the ground up. "So you're uninviting me from the reunion?" I asked. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's just, appearances matter. We have senators flying in, a few hedge fund friends. It's not personal." But it always was. I bit my tongue as she rambled on about how she had secured the venue, the Bellstone, a 5-star historic property renowned for its opulence. "Took me weeks of persuasion," she bragged. "The manager said their founder was elusive but brilliant. Some woman named Eve. I think she must be French or something." I nearly laughed. That woman. That French mystery. That was me. The Bellstone was one of my most challenging restoration projects, one that turned into a national landmark under my leadership. I had personally approved the Kensington event at triple our standard rate, knowing the surname alone would bait them. The irony? She had no idea she was talking to the owner. I didn't correct her. I just said, "Sounds like you really pulled strings." "You have no idea," Blythe replied smugly. "Well, maybe next year you'll have something going on that's, worth mentioning." She hung up before I could respond. But I didn't need to. I turned to my assistant, Gia, standing quietly nearby with an envelope in hand. "It's confirmed," she said. "They signed the Bellstone contract without reading the ownership clause." I smiled. "Perfect. Let's make sure it's a night they never forget." That evening, I sat alone in the architect's suite of the Bellstone, reviewing the final layout. Every inch of this estate bore my vision. Vaulted ceilings, reclaimed marble, custom lighting designs that made the crystal chandeliers seem like floating stardust. And now they were about to host a reunion meant to exclude me in a building I practically resurrected from ruins. I leaned back in my leather chair and stared at the glowing name etched above the ballroom entrance, Vail Grand Hall. They never asked what I'd been building, but that didn't matter, because now, they were walking straight into it. The days leading up to the reunion felt like quiet thunder. I gave no hint of interference, let every plan unfold exactly as Blythe imagined, while behind the scenes I made subtle but deliberate changes. The flower arrangements were updated with imported peonies, the same ones she had once called tacky. The custom menus were printed on parchment with the Vail crest in gold foil, so subtle most wouldn't notice until they did. I had the wine swapped for one produced by a vineyard I owned in Tuscany. The small things, the quiet flexes, each one a brick in the beautiful passive spectacle I was orchestrating. The entire reunion was becoming a stage. They just didn't know I was the one writing the script. Gia stood by my side as we finalized the lighting cue schedule. "You're really doing this," she said, awe in her voice. "You're going to let them walk in, drink your wine, pose in your ballroom, and then watch the floor vanish beneath them." I didn't answer immediately. I stared out the leaded glass windows, the old oak trees casting long shadows over the estate lawn. "They erased me for years, Gia, and now they're coming here to show off to each other in a house I built from my bones." My voice was calm, not bitter, just certain. "Let them pretend they still run the show, then let the truth walk in wearing heels." That morning, I walked through every room of the Bellstone like it was a cathedral. I ran my fingers along the carved mahogany banisters. I touched the stone fireplace mantel in the drawing room, the one I commissioned from a quarry in line. My hand brushed the linen napkins printed with the family crest, subtly updated with a redesign that incorporated my initials. None of them would notice until they looked closer, and that was the whole point. They'd always told me I didn't belong. that I didn't carry the Kensington image, but the truth was, they never looked close enough to see what I had become. By 5:00 p.m., luxury cars began arriving. I watched the footage from the security room, sipping tea like it was champagne. The cousins in designer gowns, uncles with cigar breath and overconfidence, aunts with frozen smiles, and Blythe, of course, floated in like she owned the place. Her dress shimmered in gold, her heels stabbing the polished floors like they owed her something. I watched her toss a condescending compliment at the maitre d', then snap at a server for blocking her photo. I let her bask in her illusion a little longer. After all, she'd spent her whole life trying to prove she belonged to something more. She just didn't realize that something was me. I emerged briefly, dressed in black silk and confidence, walking the perimeter of the ballroom unnoticed. One server nodded at me, another winked. My team knew exactly who I was. But to the guests, I was just part of the decor, exactly how I wanted it, for now. The music swelled, and laughter filled the hall. Blythe clinked glasses with the senator's son. My Uncle Greg made some joke about people who choose passion over paychecks. I smiled to myself. Let them laugh. Let them shine. The brighter they burned, the sharper the shadows I'd soon reveal. At exactly 6:55 p.m., Gia sent me a simple text. Stage is set. I moved toward the back entrance of the ballroom, my heels echoing softly against the marble. This was the same family that had once left me off the group photo, because I couldn't afford the dress code. The same family that sent accidental emails without my name on the RSVP list. But tonight, they were on my guest list. My fingers brushed the sleek folder tucked under my arm, the one that held the truth. And in 5 minutes, the past would meet the present, on my terms. The Bellstone ballroom was drenched in golden light, every inch gleaming like it had been waiting for this moment. My moment. The massive glass doors at the rear of the hall slid open with a soft hiss as I stepped in, unnoticed at first. Conversations carried on, shallow, boastful, self-congratulatory. I moved slowly, quietly, like a ghost returned to the house that once turned her away, until the manager, Kurt, in his tailored navy suit, approached the podium just beside the string quartet. His voice, crisp and polite, cut through the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special presentation this evening, requested personally by the estate's founder. The music faded. Glasses paused mid-air. I saw Blythe tilt her head, confused. Founder? She mouthed to her sister. My father leaned in, his brow furrowing. That word, founder, wasn't in any of their narratives. To them, the Bellstone was just an old money venue, wrangled by Blythe's connections. But now something had shifted. The LED wall behind the podium, lit up with soft visuals, architectural sketches, restoration photos, time-lapse footage of workers rebuilding this estate, from rubble to majesty. Then came the final frame. Vision, by Alara Vale, founder and CEO Vale Global. Blythe's face drained of color, her lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped forward slowly, pausing just beside the podium, the spotlight now catching me in full. Some gasped. Others murmured. My father stood up entirely. Alara? He said, but not with joy. With disbelief. What are you doing here? I turned, met his stare, and smiled softly. Hosting. That one word carried everything I'd swallowed for the past 15 years. Every insult, every rejection, every moment they dismissed my ambition as not. The truth was standing in heels before them, in the heart of the empire they didn't know they'd walked into. I took the microphone gently, my voice calm and resonant. I wanted to thank you all for choosing the Bellstone for your elegant reunion. I've heard so much about how difficult it was to secure this venue. Laughter rippled through the staff. A few cousins shifted uncomfortably. I also heard, I continued, that only the most worthy Kensingtons were invited, those deemed presentable, successful, appropriate. I let that word hang in the air. So I hope it doesn't ruin your evening, to know that the woman you considered too poor, too off-brand, too invisible, was the one who wrote your invitation into this building, and every dollar spent tonight went right back into my legacy. The silence was like velvet. Thick, heavy. My Uncle Greg looked like he wanted to disappear. My Aunt Cecilia reached for her pearls, her eyes scanning the room like she just realized she was underdressed in the wrong kind of war. I saw Blythe's hand tremble around her champagne flute. She'd spent the last 3 weeks bragging about booking this place. Now it was slipping through her fingers like sand. "You lied," she hissed across the room. "You let me take credit." I tilted my head. "No, you assumed credit. I simply let you speak." Then I looked to Kurt, who nodded and passed around the gold-trimmed envelopes. Each guest received one. Inside, the truth. A detailed portfolio of the Bellstone's transformation, a letter from me, and most delicately, a billing summary. Blythe's voice cracked as she opened hers. "This can't be real, Alara. This invoice, this rate is insane." I raised a brow. "Oh, the Kensington surcharge, that was real. You wanted exclusivity. I delivered." Blythe's perfectly polished facade cracked like porcelain. Her cheeks flushed, her voice sharpened. "This is humiliating. You set me up." I walked closer, slow and deliberate, each step echoing across the marble, like punctuation. "No, Blythe. I set the table. You sat yourself at the head." My tone was measured, almost kind. That's what made it sting more. She wasn't used to grace under power, she was used to dominance under pretense. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for support, but no one stepped in. Even her mother, Aunt Corin, pretended to sip wine, as if she hadn't once told me to marry rich before I ran out of time. Uncle Greg finally blurted, "So, you've been hiding all this?" His voice was accusatory, almost offended, like I owed him the privilege of watching me build what they once mocked. I turned toward him and said, "I wasn't hiding. You just never looked. I've been building hotels, estates, resorts, quietly, while you were too busy asking what I was doing with my life. I was out there designing the life you're standing in right now." That shut him up. Aunt Cecilia, still clutching her pearls, whispered something under her breath. It didn't matter. Nothing could soften the blow. Not anymore. At the back of the room, I spotted my younger cousin Juliet, the only one who ever asked me about my work over the years. Her eyes were wide, not with envy, but awe. She gave me the smallest nod. It landed heavy. Validation didn't need to come from the loudest voices. Sometimes it arrived quietly, from the ones who'd been watching, wondering if it was possible to bloom beyond the boundaries of blood. I returned the nod, and it felt like a lifeline stretched between two women in a room full of people who only saw value when it glittered. Gia stepped forward discreetly and handed me a tablet. "It's time," she whispered. I nodded. The lights dimmed. Every digital screen around the ballroom flickered on. A new presentation began. This one a global showcase. Footage rolled of my properties, the Arctic Eco Lodge in Finland, the glass retreat on the cliffs of New Zealand, the Mediterranean palace built atop ancient Roman stone. The camera swept over architectural wonders and team celebrations, sustainability milestones, and world-renowned awards. The room stood frozen, jaws slack. My story was no longer a secret. It was a spectacle. When the screens faded to black, I cleared my throat. "Some of you told me no Kensington works in service, and you were right. I don't work in service." I paused, let the weight of my next words build. "I lead it, I redefine it. I elevate it. While you fought to be seen at charity galas and yacht clubs, I quietly became the reason those places now ask me to design them." The silence wasn't just stunned, it was shattered. Their version of me no longer existed, and in its place stood the woman they never thought to imagine. At the far edge of the room, my father hadn't moved. His eyes were locked on me, audible, though his clenched jaw betrayed something deeper. Not just surprise, not just pride, regret. The kind that eats through bone. He had once told me I was wasting my time chasing a hobby, and now he stood in a legacy shaped by that very dream. But I wasn't finished. Not yet, because what came next wasn't just for revenge, it was for release. The air inside the Bellstone ballroom had shifted. The confidence that once dripped from every Kensington like spilled champagne was gone. In its place, stunned silence, hesitant glances, and a growing awareness that the ground beneath them had changed. I let the moment breathe, let the weight of their assumptions sit heavy on their shoulders. Then, softly but deliberately, I broke it. "Before the evening continues, I'd like to address the guest list," I said, turning toward Blythe. There was some concern that not everyone was appropriate to attend this year's event, that perhaps some names didn't belong. My eyes narrowed, but my voice never wavered. So let me be very clear tonight, everyone is here at my invitation. Every single one. I turned toward the AV table where Gia waited with a tap of her finger. One final cue. A second screen lit up behind me, this time displaying the original invitation to the reunion. Names, titles, event code and a small line of text at the bottom. Venue reservation secured by eVale Holdings. Slowly I walked to the center of the room. This place, this event, this night. All of it passed through my hands. I chose the linens you're eating on, the music you're dancing to, the scent piped through the air ducts. Even your dinner forks were handpicked by me. Laughter rippled through the staff at the back of the room. Some guests chuckled nervously. Others looked ill. Blythe had turned pale, her mouth open but empty. Why? Why would you do this? She finally asked. It wasn't anger in her voice anymore. It was fear. Not fear of me, but fear of reflection. Fear of what she saw when all the masks fell. Because, I said, stepping closer, this is what it feels like to be treated as irrelevant, dismissed, talked down to. I lived in that feeling for years, while you all clinked glasses and bragged about your last name, like it was currency. And tonight, I turned that currency into the bill. Gia began handing out smaller envelopes. These weren't invoices, these were press kits. What is this? My uncle asked, flipping through the high-gloss pages. A media package, I replied. Val Global's next announcement goes live at midnight. The world will know that the Bellstone belongs to me. The story will go viral. A former black sheep, returning in power to host the very people who exiled her. It's practically made for headlines. My voice was silk now, confident and cool. And don't worry, I made sure all of you appear in the background of the photos. At the far end of the room, my father set down his drink and walked forward. Slowly, deliberately. You really built all this, without us, he said, quieter than I expected. I studied him. This man who once told me to stop playing with dreams and get a real job, who once refused to co-sign my first lease. Yes, I said. Without your help, without your belief, without your blessing, but not without the fire you lit in me when you shut the door. His jaw flexed. There was nothing more he could say. But I wasn't here for revenge alone. I was here for the girl I used to be, the one who sat in motel back rooms drafting blueprints by hand, while her family laughed in penthouses they hadn't earned. I turned to the room, voice calm, but final. I'm not asking for recognition. I'm not asking for your applause. I'm offering you a truth you never gave me, a seat at the table I built. And then I added, with a faint smile, but this time, you'll sit where I place you. As the final words left my lips, the tension in the room cracked like glass under pressure. They weren't just shocked, they were rearranging their understanding of who I was, and more importantly, who they had refused to see. I watched as their eyes darted to one another, like they were all realizing at once that their pride had come at a cost. Access to me, to my world, to the empire I built while they were busy keeping me out of the photo frame. It was almost poetic. I had been too poor for their table, so I built the building they were now begging to stay in. Blythe tried to recover, straightening her spine. Alara, this doesn't have to be ugly. We're family. I walked toward her slowly, keeping my gaze steady. No, Blythe. This is elegance. This is what grace looks like after it's been forged through fire. You didn't want me here because of how I made you look. But tonight, I let you see yourself. She swallowed hard, and for once, had no retort. Just silence. A painful, dawning silence that echoed in the corners of the room, louder than any words. My father cleared his throat. I was wrong, he said. The words came out like a confession dragged from the depths of a soul that had never learned how to say sorry. About your choices, your strength. I didn't see it. I nodded slowly. You didn't have to see it. I just needed to see myself. His face twisted, regret, pride, shame, tangled into a single look I'd waited my whole life to witness. Is there anything I can do now? He asked. I walked to the bar, picked up a small elegant envelope and handed it to him. Inside was a keycard, the royal suite. It's yours for the weekend. You might need time to reflect comfortably. The guests began shuffling, conversations muffled. Some glanced around, unsure of how to act. Others followed the staff to their suites, upgraded, luxurious, yet now heavy with the truth of whose name was stitched into the pillows. As they dispersed, Gia joined me quietly, her her eyes on the scene. You did it, she said softly. They finally saw you. I exhaled, the weight lifting from my chest after years of silent resilience. They saw what I built, but more importantly, I saw who I became. Later that night, I stood alone on the balcony of my penthouse. The city lights of Savannah stretched for me, a tapestry of everything I had earned, one decision, one failure, one victory at a time. My phone buzzed, a message from Blythe. Breakfast tomorrow, please? I smiled and typed back. Nan, corner booth. I own that cafe too. It wasn't just about the Bellstone, or the Kensingtons. It was about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. I was proof that belonging isn't given, it's created. As the stars scattered above the estate I revived with my own hands, I whispered to the girl I used by, the one who cleaned rooms and dreamed of chandeliers. They didn't believe in you, but you believed in yourself, and that was enough. I turned from the view and closed the doors behind me, not out of pettiness, but peace, the kind that comes when your worth no longer needs to be proven, only live. And tonight, I lived it.